We're talking today with Duane Lancaster of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, so Duane, start us off with some background on yourself, and to begin with, where and when were you born?
Okay, I was born in on Burlingame on August 16th, 1942.
Okay, that's Burlingame Avenue, as in Grand Rapids.
Yeah,
Michigan,
it was known as Grand Rapids then.
Right.
It used to be a hill there, and now it's
Okay. Well, how far
flat.
south on Burlingame were you?
Well, we were at the top of what used to be the hill. It was 28th, so it was probably around 36th or
Okay.
something.
All right.
Rogers Plaza's there now.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So a whole lot less there then. So that was largely still farms at that point, or that area?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then did you grow up in Grand Rapids?
I grew up in Grand Rapids. I went to Michigan State, and then my first job was as a sports writer in Saginaw.
Okay. So let's back up here a little bit. What did your family do for a living when you were a kid?
Well, my dad was he worked at Calvinator, and he sprayed enamel on refrigerators. And the poor guy did that for 34 years.
Wow.
And then I guess this last couple of years there, somebody thought it'd be a good idea if they wore masks.
Uh-huh.
So he died of emphysema.
Wow.
Yeah, he had in 34 years he was there. My mom was a housewife. She never did have a formal job.
Okay. All right. And so you're born during World War II.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And so you would have been too young to really remember any of that, probably. Do you?
That's correct. I don't remember the surrender or anything. And I missed Pearl Harbor.
Yep. Yeah.
That's a big history event that I missed.
Right.
I also missed the Magna Carta. But
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So when did you graduate from high school?
I graduated from high school. As a matter of fact, I'm up here for our 60th class reunion. But I graduated in 1961 from
Okay.
Wyoming Park High School.
All right. Okay. You went to Michigan State from there.
Well, no, I went to Grand Rapids Junior College
Okay.
from there. And then I graduated from Michigan State in 1965,
Okay.
when they were actually good in football.
Mm-hmm. So they have been periodically, even in more recent years.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So you do that, and then you got your job as a journalist in
Saginaw, Michigan.
In Saginaw, Michigan.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, had you registered for the draft by then?
No, I hadn't. In fact, it all started, it was July, about a month after I graduated, and I got a notice from my draft board that asked, how come we no longer have a 2S deferment for you? And I, being quite gullible, wrote back, because I graduated, ha ha. And within 3 days, I got a notice to report for my physical
Okay.
at Fort Wayne.
Okay.
In-
And that's in Detroit.
In Detroit there. Canada was right across the... I remember looking at it and thinking about it, and I finally was more scared to do that than I was to face whatever would come
Okay.
down.
All right. Well, that's still 1965. So.
Yeah. This was the June of '65.
Yeah.
So
So Vietnam has only just really started to heat up in terms
Yeah.
of the ground war. We don't
yes,
yet
correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was.
and we don't have a lot of casualties coming back or things like that.
No,
It's just something in the news. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
And when I was at State, I was never a big vocal protester of the war. I did my best to ignore it, as a matter of fact. So I never laid across the street in protest of all that. It
Yeah.
was.
Well, there wasn't too much. Most of that stuff, at least what is famous, came later.
Yeah. Right.
So at the time you were there, I mean, while you were still in school, were you aware of what was going on at all?
I was aware of Vietnam, but like I said, my biggest concern was just to ignore it. I tried to pretend it didn't happen.
Mhm.
And I didn't have any great political feelings about it. The only thing was I don't want my butt to get involved in it.
Right.
That was I didn't have any strong feelings one way or the other about how the government should be run or anything like that. I just count me out.
Just didn't really want to be bothered with it.
That's correct.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So now, when they did the physical at Fort Wayne, how seriously did they take that?
Well, I remember telling them that I had a lot of things wrong with me. I told them that I had a criminal record, that I bought beer for my little brother once. I told them I had a bad knee, and I got to do an extra knee bend before he said, "You're all right." And I told him I wet the bed, which nobody believed. But the funny thing about that was that when I got out, all these things had cleared up.
Mm-hmm.
I said, "No, the Army must have really fixed me up because I don't have any of that problem anymore." But
Okay. So they passed you just fine.
yeah, oh yeah, sure.
Right. Now you're playing with your accordion. Yeah. Okay. All right. So you're gonna get through. Okay, but you have the physical, then you just go home.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, did you get a draft notice?
Yes, I actually did have the greetings.
Okay. Now, when did you get that?
That was probably in maybe September of that year.
Okay. And then what did you do after you got that notice?
Then I says, "Hey, I better find a reserve unit somewhere." That's the first time I started thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really fortunate because I was a sports writer.
Mm-hmm.
And they still do it. Newspapers have a football tabloid where they prepare stuff for the high schools and all that. And it just so happened that one of the stories I did was with the Midland High School coach, Greer, who happened to be the captain of the local reserve unit. And he's obviously the one that got me in. But the basic training logs were so backed up that I was in the reserves for about 6 months before I had to go to basic training.
Okay.
That's all.
So once you enlist in the reserves, now do you not do anything until after basic training? Or
Well,
do
no,
you
I got the 6 months and it counted towards my 6 years.
Okay, but did you go to the local reserve meetings?
Yes, I had to go to the drills, and I guess I was a private, which is not rank. I wasn't.
Yeah, you have.
Yeah.
You know, sort of you have the buck private or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, you're not even first class at this
No,
point.
that's right. No,
You're just
yeah, you had to get out of basic, I think, to become a PFC.
at least, if not something.
Yeah,
usually,
maybe.
you know, but by the time anyone who went to Vietnam was at least a PFC. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, you're not really. So what did you do at the drills and stuff there in those first 6 months? What was?
Well, we would drill. We'd go out in the parking lot and drill. And that was another thing I wasn't very, very proficient at, was drilling. I remember in basic drill that it was something like first squad to the rear march, and then second, and you're supposed to end up all together at the end, and we ended up streaming all. Yeah. So no, I didn't like to drill, but that's what we did that. I don't think we had any particular classes or anything. It was mostly drill, and what you had to do was 2 days a month, or we could go 4 days at a 4-hour drill at night. They were usually on Saturday and Sunday, or Thursday nights for 4 hours.
Okay. And what kind of mix of people were in your unit in terms of how old they were, their backgrounds?
Well, there weren't very many blacks, I remember. In fact, I remember no blacks. They were all from the Saginaw area.
And did you have people who had been active duty veterans who were back, or were these most
I
reserve
ran
guys?
across those only when we went to summer camp.
Okay.
And we'd have attachees, which I always thought was unfair because these guys had actually been in the real game. And they would always get the crap jobs of barracks or KP detail or something. And where the yellow berets, and the captain or whoever the head of the unit was knew we had to go back and drill with these guys, so he always took care of us. And he crapped on the real ones, and I always thought that was really a lousy thing that a guy who had actually been in would have to go back and mess with us candlestick makers.
Right. Okay. Now, what kind of unit was the one at Saginaw?
It was a military police unit. So after basic, I had to go to Fort Gordon to military police school.
Okay. All right. So you're military police now. But you're only, so when you were doing those drills, before you went off to basic or to your advanced training, did you do anything with your unit that actually related to what MPs did?
Well, during summer camp, we would act as the police force for the, we could give speeding tickets and such things.
But you hadn't gone to summer camp yet before you went to basic, because you went.
No,
Okay. All right.
I'd gone to basic before
All
summer
right.
camp.
Okay. So when did you go to basic?
Finally, I know it was in the winter, so it must have been like January of that year.
Okay.
And I went to Fort Leonard Wood. And probably the thing I remember most about that was that the only thing that they seemed to spend much time on was the rifle range. And we went out for three of our 8 weeks on the rifle range. And I was pretty horrible at that. We had M14s, and I got a black eye because I'd flinch every time when I would shoot. And true story, we had to qualify. I think 35 was a marksman, and maybe 120 shots. And the targets we shot at were pop-up targets, anywhere from 50 to 350, and they'd stay up for 10 seconds.
That's 50 feet away or
50. Maybe, no, it was yards. It was
Yards.
Either 50 yards away or 350. And first time I went out there, I looked down my barrel and they crossed, and I got a 12, which might set a record for the lowest number of a 12. And they obviously wanted to know what was wrong, and I told them about seeing 2 barrels. So the next day I go out, and they put a patch on my eye. So now I'm like John Wayne in True Grit, hunting for these dumb things, and I got a 17. And I don't, and I just imagine this now. They're saying, hey, the basic training units are all backed up. We got this clown from the reserves who can't hit the broadside anything. We got to do something. So the third day I go out there, and I don't think I fired 30 times. I got a 49. And so I got the rifle with the little sling on it and everything. And I was a sharpshooter. So when I went back to my unit and couldn't hit the broadside anything, I just said, it's got to be the weapon, because it says here I'm a sharpshooter.
Now, when you were in basic, were you in a group that was all reservists? Or
Yes, 80% of my unit were reservists. And so we won the mule for the next cycle by being the worst unit. Like I said, about 80% of us were ERs and NGs. ER 774, 8074, sir. Yeah. Yeah, and we won Zeke, the mule, for the next unit that goes through. And we were all pretty good on the written tests, but the PT tests and the drill tests were just horrible. Okay.
Now, had a lot of these guys been to college?
Yeah, most of them were. You almost had to be in college to get into the reserves. So, yeah, and most of us were a bit older, in our 20s. So I didn't have the big thing of missing home and things like that. But I wasn't in shape like the 17-year-old guys and everything. So that was really hard for me.
Okay.
I think you had to run a mile in 6 minutes or something, and I did it in 8 or something. Yeah. So I was not very physically abundant, and I smoked then. So.
Okay. And how did the drill instructors treat you?
The biggest thing I remember about our particular Sergeant Fava was he could not say a sentence without using the F word.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was effing outstanding, or yeah. And there was one I for some reason I really feared. His name was Sergeant Purcell, and he must have been a native Indian or something, but I was really afraid of him. When he spoke, I listened. The other ones kind of went in one ear and out the other, but Purcell I was quite, yeah.
All right. How much of an emphasis was there on discipline there?
Oh, there was quite a bit of emphasis. I didn't take it that seriously,
Mhm.
but yeah, there was.
Well,
They didn't put up with too much back talk or mouthing off. Yeah.
okay. As far as you could tell, did they treat the people who were actual draftees or ones going on to active duty, did they treat them any differently from you? Or
Well, we thought so. We thought we were picked out because they always ask your service number,
Mm-hmm.
and if you were regular Army, it was RA something, and I'd say ER, and right away that was worth 10 push-ups.
And I think draftees were maybe U.S. or so they had a
Yeah, it was a different.
But a draftee is still going in for, real active duty and a full
correct.
hitch. Yeah. So, but but ER is enlisted reserve, and so that's
Yeah, oh yeah. I thought we were picked on anyway.
okay. Now, did you get disciplined in different ways yourself?
No, not personally. I don't remember getting. No, I had my regular chore at KP and watching a brick building at fire watch at 2 in the morning, but everybody did
Okay.
got
So there's
that.
the regular rotation of duties and things everybody does. Now,
Yeah.
would the whole platoon or group you were training with sometimes be punished for something? Doing extra push-ups or whatever?
I don't really remember that happening.
Okay.
No, that the
No.
whole unit was.
Yeah. And were there men in your unit who screwed up in a way that they got attention from the drill instructors, or was it all fairly?
It was
Yeah.
all fairly, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Because I think that experience varies a lot just depending on what unit you're training
Oh
with.
yeah, and if I had taken it seriously, I guess it would have been kind of bad. But one of the reasons I just couldn't take it seriously is we would have classes probably up to 50 people, and I remember our instructor one time saying, "All right, you're sitting in a rice paddy, and a Viet Cong comes up, Charlie comes up behind you and puts a weapon on you. What are you going to do?" "Oh, geez, I'm going to surrender and tell them whatever they want." And he said, "No." You go, "Ha!" And you parry his rifle with this. "Are you kidding me? Are you serious?" So I just couldn't take that. And that was an introduction to hand-to-hand combat, which we spent an afternoon on. And that was the thing that I think if they're going to send me to Vietnam, I would have demanded to go through it again, and I'll pay attention this time. Because the rifle range was the only thing we spent any amount of time on. A half day on hand-to-hand combat, a half day on throwing a grenade, and just brushing over things. And I said, they really send people with this kind of training to? Yeah, it was. Oh.
Well, the infantrymen would have had at least advanced individual
Yeah,
training.
right.
for
This, of
infantry.
course, was on before I went to
Yeah,
military police school.
So this is just general for everybody.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And at that point, they didn't have that many people back yet from Vietnam who actually knew what was going to happen.
No, that's true. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So how long did basic training last?
8 weeks. Actually, ours was 9 because we got started a week late because there was a snowstorm in Michigan and our plane didn't take off.
Okay.
But I was there 9 weeks, and then they sent me to Fort Gordon for another 8 weeks. So a total of 17 weeks. And the week that we didn't train, they just sent us around the camp when we had to pick up litter and things like that. But I was I guess it was all right. But,
Yeah. So you were late, so you missed the start of your regular training
yes,
cycle.
and then they
so
had
you
to
just
wait
start with
for
the next group.
another cycle to start.
Okay.
Yeah.
But they're starting every week.
Yeah.
So they were,
Yeah.
all right. So what was Fort Leonard Wood like? What do you remember about the place?
Well, I went there in February. I remember it was cold, very cold. And I remember before breakfast we had to swing on the monkey bars, and I couldn't do that. I'd have to go and then hang there, and I got blisters from doing that. So I thought I could get out of it by not going to breakfast, but they made me do it anyway to go to breakfast. So. The only thing that I heard a lot of gripes about that I didn't think was so bad was the food. The food wasn't that bad. They called it shit on a single, and that was pretty good, I thought.
Okay.
Yeah, but everything else they said about it was true. I thought.
All right. Now, how did they get you from Fort Leonard Wood to Fort Gordon?
We flew.
Okay.
Yeah.
And were you flying on commercial planes or?
Yeah, we were on commercial planes, yeah.
Okay. Because I guess your class would have split up and gone in different directions from basic, so you're not going as a group somewhere.
Yeah. Most of us had been, because we were in the reserves, were predestined to where we'd go after
Right.
that anyway.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, did you pick MP, or did they pick that for you?
No, that just happened to be the reserve unit that
Oh, that's
I
right.
was
That's
in.
right. There
Yeah.
you go. Okay. So-
And I never did get out on police duty. I was a clerk typist. They had enough sense to keep me in from that. And the cruddy thing about that I always thought was patrol was that you had to learn when an officer's car was going by so you could salute it. And I wouldn't know that. I'd look around and look for a blue sticker on that. But no, I was just a clerk typist, so I didn't have to.
Okay. So describe the training at Fort Gordon.
The main thing I remember about Fort Gordon's training was we practiced with a 45, and for some reason I wasn't that bad with a 45. I actually legitimately qualified with that. Well, let's see, what was, the classes, on the Uniform Code of Military Justice. They were so boring. And I remember there was a guy that stood in the back with a big long stick, and he'd bonk you on the head with it if you dozed off. And that got to be so bad that, and by then I had not totally gotten over it, but I wasn't as scared then as I was when I first went in. So us and maybe another 5 or 6 of us decided we weren't going to those classes anymore. So when the column went around the corner, we went to these woods and slept the afternoon away. And I know we finally got caught doing that, and we had to spend a day chopping down the woods in there so that others wouldn't do it. But yeah, I remember those classes just being just horribly dull. And
Well, how did you do on the tests?
on the written test, I did okay, but on the PT and of course, the emphasis wasn't quite so much on PT there as it was in basic. One of the things that reminded me of when I was in basic, we were going to have a inspection general, where a general comes through, and I can remember at 2 in the morning, lying on my back under my bunk, straightening the wires on there. And of course, when he came through, he didn't even look at us. He just drove by without. And that's the only time I ever saw a general, so I don't know what they're like.
All right. What were the instructors at Fort Gordon like? Were they any different from the ones you had at Leonard Wood?
Well, again, most of the instruction I had in AIT, Advanced Individual Training, was lectures
It was
and
classroom
school.
stuff.
Yeah. Whereas the one in basic was
Well, more physical. out
yeah,
in the
more
rifle
physical
range.
stuff and yeah.
That kind of stuff.
And one of the things I remember about AIT was I did a lot of things with a black kid named Percy, what was his name? Percy Lamb. We threw the grenades together and did hand-to-hand combat together. And I can remember at graduation, they said his name, and they said Percy Lamb, Saigon. And they said Duane Lancaster, Saginaw. And I don't know if it's Saginaw sounded like Saigon or what, but I could just feel that kid when we went back in line, staring at me and saying, how come I'm going to Saigon and this white dude is going to go back to Saginaw? And I always kind of wondered about Percy. I went to the Vietnam Wall and I didn't find his name on it, so hopefully
Good.
Percy
Well,
got through.
If he went as an MP, odds are pretty high that he came through in one piece, because a lot of the combat casualties
Yeah,
would
yeah,
have been
that's
the
true.
infantry.
That's true. Yeah.
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 Yeah, and that early, if he had gone that soon, gone in '66, then it might
Yeah.
not have been as bad as it
Yeah.
would have been later. But yeah, okay, yeah, he got through. Of course, he would have been a draftee or a regular enlistee, though.
Yes.
rather than-
Yeah, that's right. He was one of the few that was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, now, when you were at AIT, did you still have a lot of reservists, or did you have more guys who were going full time?
Not as much as was in basic, but
Mhm.
yeah, there was maybe about half of us were ERs and NGs.
All right.
yeah.
Now, okay. At AIT, did they treat the reservists and others differently?
No, actually not. No, I sure thought they did in basic, but
Yeah, AIT could be a different
Yeah.
setup there. Now, did you get to go off base at all when you were at Fort Gordon?
no, and that's one of the reasons I always felt sorry for the squad leader, because we were so bad. They took away the privilege of going.
Okay.
So the poor squad leader would have to go to the thing and buy stuff for us and keep track of the money and go there and get toothpaste and have to bring your 79 cents back from your dollar. And
Okay. So you
Yeah.
couldn't even go to the PX to buy stuff?
no, they considered that a privilege. And,
Okay.
so
Okay. So even in AIT, you were with a unit that was messing up badly enough that
yeah, we were not.
All right. Yeah, because I'm asking that in part because Fort Gordon, you're down in Georgia, and that's still mid-'60s, and there's a lot of racial tension or issues going on. A lot of the civil rights acts have passed, but the place is still segregated. But I mean, did you notice any of that at all? The segregation or racial issues, or were you so
No,
isolated?
Again, most of our, both of in basic and AIT, most of them were whites anyway,
Mhm.
so it really wasn't.
Yeah.
Percy was one of the few blacks that I knew there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you weren't out in the community, so you couldn't see what that was like.
No. I got to Augusta once
Mhm.
and went to a brothel there. Yeah. But I never got to see around. I never got to see the Masters tournament or anything.
Mhm.
But and that was only once. I think I was 8 weeks. I had one, and I must have spent overnight there because that was about 20 miles from Fort Gordon.
Mhm.
So I must have spent overnight. But
All right.
and in basic, I did not
Yeah.
leave our barracks at all.
And that was fairly common. Okay. So when do you finish AIT?
It was in April sometime, and then they flew me home, and I went back to my reserve unit in, was it Saginaw? No, by the time I got out of AIT, I went back to Saginaw.
Mhm.
And got credit for the 6 months that I had waited to get in and
Mhm.
the 17 weeks. So I went back to Saginaw with, I think I was a PFC by then.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
Yeah.
And then with your unit at Saginaw, now did you get a regular assignment, or were you just a guy?
I was, nothing. Even though we were an MP unit, we obviously didn't do anything in the town as
Right.
there.
Okay.
The only time we did that was in summer camp.
Okay. So talk about summer camp. Where do you go? What do you do?
Well, I was in 2 different units, like I
Mhm,
said,
yeah.
and no matter what, I ended up at Camp McCoy, Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's a fort now.
Yeah.
And like I said, when I went as a military police unit, we were the MPs for like 2 weeks. When I went with the transportation unit, I don't really think we served a function except our own training that we went there.
All right. So then with the MP unit, I mean, what do you remember about the first camp you went to?
I remember, oh yeah, we took a caravan from Saginaw around Lake Michigan, and we stayed overnight in some little town in Indiana, I remember. And we were supposed to pitch our pup tents, but I didn't want to do that, so I crawled on top of the truck to try to sleep, and it rained that night, and I rolled around. I was just a filthy mess by morning. I had grease all over my face and hands, and
So were you in the back of the truck, or were you up
no,
on,
I went
top
up
of
on
the
top of the.
on
Yeah,
the-
if I
on
had
the-
enough sense to sleep in the cab, I would have probably been all right. But I went on top of it. Maybe
Okay.
somebody else was already in the cab.
All
But,
right. But it starts to
Yeah.
rain. You don't go to find a place where you can be
well,
dry?
by then, but I was shafted by then. So,
Okay.
yeah, I just gutted it all.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. And then once you got there, what was it like?
Well, there are two things I remember. And for some reason, of all the things that we went through basic training, I hated. The gas chamber was not one of them. I didn't mind that. You took your mask off and said your service number, and it goes through.
And that's when they're putting tear
Yeah,
gas in,
yeah,
basically.
yeah. And either it didn't bother me or they had a weak thing, but it didn't. It really didn't bother me. But we were going to do it, and we did again. A couple other conspirators and I decided we didn't want to do that. So when they went around the corner, we broke off and went back to the bus and told the bus driver that we were through. And so we got on the bus and took off, and we look out the back, and there's old Captain Clipboard. He was an ROTC guy from Central Michigan. He's running after us. And when we got back to camp finally, he was going to tear us up. We said, "You mean you're going to tell your superiors that you let this whole group of men lost track of them and everything?" So he signed our things that we had gone through anyway. Oh, Captain Clipboard. And by then I was, like I said, not quite as afraid, and I was scared to death in basic. I'll be real honest with you. The worst time of my life was when we crawled the infiltration course. And I remember it was about 6 o'clock when we started. And there were these big rumors about whether the bullets were real or not. And they said, the machine guns are cemented in place. But I swear I saw something go by at night. So I started with Group B, and I ended up with Group G. I found a hole and just stayed there. That was the most terrifying thing I ever went through was that. And I to this day don't know if they really are, but it sure looked real to me. I saw some kind, and it was quite dark out by the time I finished it. So I think it was like an hour and a half from the time I started and finished it.
Well, they would have at least had tracers, so you could see little streaks of
Yeah,
light going past.
yeah.
And whether they were otherwise blank rounds or not, who knows? But yeah.
And then I wanted to tell you this one. This is now I've been in for maybe 5 years, and this is at a drill. And when we had an all-day drill, they had to feed us. And we decided, a few of us, that we were going to skip lunch and play basketball. But while they were setting up for lunch, I went by this table that had these little pies on it. I thought, well, I'll have one of those before we play, and I won't be quite so hungry. So I started eating it, and I got juice running down the side of my face and everything. And I guess it was a sergeant came over and said, saw that I was eating this pie. He said, "What's the name, soldier?" And in a moment of brilliance, I said, "Apple, sir." That was my best line ever. And I think I got an Article 15 for that, or Article 14 or 15 or something. I know I had to go in.
You got written up for it, basically.
Yeah, I had to go in and type it myself, but it was worth it. That was the best line I ever had.
All right. Okay. So, about how long did you spend with the Saginaw unit?
About a year and a half, and the only reason I transferred was I transferred jobs. I went from Saginaw to Ferris, Ferris State College as their sports information director.
Okay. How did you wind up with that job?
It's funny how when you're young, you don't like to get pushed around. But there was a guy that was on the sports staff who announced that he wanted to be a city-side reporter. And so for the summer he went over there, and I was told that I would take his spot, which meant instead of covering Central Michigan and Alma, I'd get to cover Michigan State and Michigan and that. So I got quite excited about that. And then he decided near the end of the summer that he wanted to go back to sports. And they told me I was back on Alma. And so I started looking around. And it could have been for another newspaper job. But I saw that there was an opening at Central Michigan, so I went over there and applied for that job. And in the meantime, I guess Ferris must have contacted different people to see, and they said, "Oh, there's this guy from Saginaw who interviewed with us," and they came over and actually recruited me, which is not a comfortable thing to be in when they want you and you don't care whether you get the job or not too much. But I went over there for $9,100 a year, a 12-year contract, which is better than the $125 I was making at Saginaw. But, and I guess one of the neat things about that, this was in 1968, and Ferris had its only undefeated football season. I took credit for that, but that's how I ended up there. And then my other thing was, and then I had to find a unit, and I found one in Grand Rapids. And that was kind of a pain because at least one weekend a month, I had to drive down to Grand Rapids. And
okay. Well, was US 131 a proper highway then?
yeah, it's not like it was now. It was only a two-lane.
A two-laner, yes. Yeah. So it'll take a little longer.
Yeah, yeah. But my folks lived in Wyoming, so I stayed overnight with them when I came down. But,
all right. And then, so the transportation unit, I mean, what kind of work did that involve, or what did they do?
I really don't know. It was a transportation unit. I guess we hauled stuff, equipment to different places. But again, I was in the office most of the time. They had enough sense there to not make me drive a truck or something silly like that.
All right. Now, when you're with these units, did you get to know some people well, or make some friends in the group, or just kind of hang out by yourself?
I can't say any of this. Oh, there was one kid. What was his name? Kipnis, I think. And he and I were supposed to be partners. He had one half of the pup tent, and I had the other. And he was pretty, Wendell, that was his last name. And he was pretty good. I never did learn how to put up a pup tent. But
so he did that
I remember
for you?
Yeah. So if we ever did camp, he's the one that put it up, yeah. Joe Wendell, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. And then how long did you actually stay in the reserves?
Your obligation is 6 years, so from 1966 to 1972. And I can remember my last drill. The government said I owed them $350 because I lost a pup tent and maybe some boots or something. But I didn't quibble. And I told them that all those problems I had, my bad knee and bedwetting, was all cleared up thanks to the Army. And so I paid them $350 right on the spot and got out of there.
All right. Now you're in during a period, because you're in basically during the whole time when Vietnam is a kind of a large scale
Oh,
mess.
yeah, sure.
Now, in any way, did the kind of that atmosphere at home or the anti-war movement or the rest, I mean, did that affect you or your unit in any way, or were you totally
Well,
affected by
the
it?
only thing that I got really serious about is as much as I made fun and disliked the meetings, I made sure that I went to them. Because if you missed 2 unexcused, you could be activated. And
Okay.
so I was very serious about that I never missed a drill.
Okay. And did you have to keep your hair short?
Yes, we did, yeah.
Okay. So could people look at you and figure you were military, or were there enough people with short hair in Big Rapids?
Well, when we went obviously to a drill, they knew. Up in Big Rapids, they didn't know that I was. And I never made too much bones about it. I wasn't terribly proud of anything.
Okay. All right. Now, did you do all of your field stuff at Camp McCoy, or did you ever go to Camp Grayling? Or
No. Like I said, no matter what, it was always Camp McCoy. And I can remember it was about 70 miles from La Crosse, Wisconsin. And I recall skipping out a few afternoons to go to La Crosse and spending that. Because I did finally come to the conclusion that the punishment never equaled the crime. You were always better off doing something, because they never, they threatened you with an Article 15. And I guess that would have been an issue if you were looking for a job, but if you already had employment, then I didn't care if it followed me the rest of my life or not. Yeah, that was the one lesson I learned, is that don't play it by the book, because you're a lot better off.
Okay.
And that's why I said I was probably one of the worst soldiers that ever went to, because I didn't take it seriously, and except for the infiltration course. That was the only thing I took there. Well, all the basic training, I guess, I took pretty seriously, because I was afraid of what.
Or you were afraid of it, although you had said earlier that you wished you had learned more while you were there.
Oh, I would have demanded to go through it again. And like I said, this time I'll pay attention to what you're saying. But how they could send people over there with that little training, oh, wow.
Yeah. Okay.
Like 3 weeks on the rifle range, and everything else was like a half day of something. They brushed right over it.
Okay. So if you think over your 6 years in the service, are there other particular memories that stand out for you that you haven't brought into the story yet?
No, I can't say. I can't. No?
Is she nodding okay, or have you?
No, she's not even there now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So as far as you know, that does, okay.
Oh, there she is.
Okay. All right. So then, what's the process when your time comes to an end? I mean, do you just stop showing up, or what happens at the end when you're discharged?
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Well, okay, you get to the end. I mean, is there paperwork to fill out? Or
Oh, yeah,
stuff?
you had to fill out this form, I guess because the government doesn't want you to come back and sue them for anything. So, yeah, I had to sign this form saying all these problems that I had cleared up miraculously
All right.
with the tough Army life.
Okay. Now, are there any benefits to being in the reserves? Or?
No, as a matter of fact, I'm trying to find that out. Like I said, I really don't know if I'm a veteran or not, if I'm supposed to. And I asked a reserve unit once, and if I want to get a loan to go to college or buy a house, they said I could.
Yeah.
But I don't know, the medical thing, I don't know. If I got really ill, if the government.
Yeah, could you get VA benefits or
Yeah,
anything like that?
and I honestly don't know that yet.
All right.
I don't think I deserve them.
All right. And of course, you'd already been to college, so.
Yeah, going to college wasn't.
Okay. All right.
Well, I went to Michigan State. I don't know if that's considered going to college or not.
All right. Okay, so now did you continue with a career in media or public relations, or did you go on to other stuff from there?
Yeah, I finally got really sick of the winters. And so when I finally got out of the reserves, and I can remember around October saying, "Oh, geez, here it comes again." And I finally decided I can't live like this. This is awful. So I applied for jobs nowhere north of Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
I kept it on the East Coast, but nowhere. And I was lucky enough that there was a job opening in Fort Lauderdale with the Sun Sentinel.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought the worst I can get out, or the least I can get out of this, is a free trip to Florida. But they hired me over the phone,
Mm-hmm.
and so I moved down there, and I worked for that newspaper for about 5 years, and then I took a job with another smaller paper called the Hollywood Sun Tatler, and I worked there about 7 years, and it went out of business. And so now here I am about 50, and I had to go get a real job. And I got a job with a roofing company until I spilled some tar on my wrist. And then I quit that, and I ended up being a truck driver for an oil company. And I lost that job because I wrecked a truck. And I ended up being a janitor for the city of North Lauderdale. I spent the last 7 years there. And I finally found out that a city job is a pretty good job for a loaf. Because there's no profit motive involved,
Mm-hmm.
so there isn't great. If you don't get it done Monday, we can do it Tuesday. And the benefits were pretty good. The pay was not that great, but so I ended up as a city employee.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now, when you were a sports writer in Florida, did you cover things like sort of major league type events?
Yeah,
or-
the best thing I got to do was I covered the Dolphins for about 6 years. That was way before Marina was even
Mhm.
there. And the best thing I got to do was I covered the AFC Championship game when the Dolphins beat the Jets and then went to play the 49ers in the Super Bowl. When I say I covered them, I got to go to the practices in the hot afternoon
Mhm.
and get a story. And I got to cover the home games. But the boss, the sports editor, made the trips.
Mhm.
And I usually at a game would have to go to the losing locker room because he always wanted to go to the winning locker room, which means I didn't interview Shula that often except at practices.
Mhm.
I'd usually have to go interview the Bills coach or something. And I like that. That's what I really wanted to do all my life, but it went out of business.
Yeah.
Here we are, little Hollywood, with the Miami Herald south of us and the Fort Lauderdale paper north of us. And I tried to argue once that the only way we could ever stay in business is to be a mom-and-pop paper, report the Little League scores and that, don't worry about the Dolphins and that. But they went the other way, and they went out of business. And then I had to go find a real job.
All right.
But I still am a sports writer at heart, only because I'm a frustrated jock.
Mm-hmm.
If I would not have been a police reporter or court reporter or anything like that. It's just because, well, when I was about 11, I got cut from the Little League team. I realized I wasn't going to be the center fielder for the Tigers anymore.
Right.
So I thought that might. I found out I could put a word in front of the other without messing it up too badly. So I was a sports writer for about maybe a total of 20 years.
All right. To think back a little bit to your service experience, what was your view of the whole anti-war movement and the stuff going on during that time when you were in the service?
I didn't have any strong feelings either. Like I said, as long as it didn't involve me, you can.
Just kind of minded your own business.
Yeah, just keep me out of it. What was the Ali's thing? I had no quarrel with no Kong.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I was, yeah.
Okay, except you went in and he didn't want to.
Yeah.
But I guess he was drafted. They were going to take him and make him be in the
Oh,
service.
yeah.
All right.
He was-
Because he did not get in the reserves. So, and then I guess finally, to think back in that time in the service, what do you think you learned from that or took out of it?
Learn as far as
Anything. Life, practical skills, people skills.
Well, it made me a real how should I say self-preservist that I really wanted to look out for number one.
Mm-hmm.
But it made me see the futility of war. I thought that was the dumbest thing mankind has ever attempted, because it doesn't seem to change things. If you look back to World War II, and I'm not trying to pretend I'm a history major or anything, but Japan, who was our enemy, is now our, not if not friends, certainly not
They're
our.
our friends pretty much.
And I never thought war ever solved anything, including the Civil War. I don't see, and that's one thing I fancy myself, is I really like the Civil War. But I think things would have worked out anyway. We didn't have to have just as I think we would have didn't have to fight the Revolutionary War. I think eventually England would have had to let us go. But
You like Canada.
and
Yeah.
whatever was solved in Vietnam, I don't know.
Not a whole heck of a lot.
Yeah. And it's funny because the closer the wars are to us in years, the less I know about them. Like Desert Storm, I don't know what that was supposed to solve or anything.
And now we're just finishing up 20 years in Afghanistan, having accomplished basically nothing. So
Yeah.
it certainly happened. All right. The whole thing makes for an interesting story in its own way, and a good counterpoint to this is what happens to the Vietnam veterans. Will often talk about those guys who went in the reserves. So
I'll bet you they hold us in a little bit of contempt. I think I would have.
well, some of them are envious, and some of them hold you in contempt.
The one thing that most of them have said is that they do consider me a veteran, and that means a lot to me, because like I said, I still don't know. If we have Veterans Day service or something and they say veterans stand up, I don't know if I should or not. I have on sometimes, and other times I haven't.
Well, my measure in part is, did you go to basic training?
I went to basic training, and I do have, maybe it's gone now, but I do have a hunk of paper that's an honorable discharge.
There you go. Yeah, but I mean, even that experience by itself, learning something of the military life, is something that 99% of Americans under the age of 70 don't have. So you're in that kind of select group just for that.
My little brother never went in because he became a school teacher just to avoid it. And
that trick didn't always work.
it didn't.
But it depends a little bit on local draft boards at that point, I suppose, because I've known people who got jobs as school teachers who got taken anyway.
But no, I sometimes wonder if, and I doubt it seriously, if any of my ancestors were very military like, and I don't think so. My dad was not in the service because he was too young for World War I and had 4 kids by the time World War II came around, so he missed it.
Well, your brother was in.
Yeah, Dale was in. And it's kind of funny because I didn't really talk to him much about it. I don't, until I saw his tape that you did with him, didn't really know what he thought about it.
All right.
At least even though he didn't see combat, at least was in the real game.
He was in it, and he went overseas, and he had interesting
yeah.
jobs. Yeah, so you can have all that. But yeah.
The best I did was the Battle of Camp McCoy.
There we are.
Yeah.
All right.
I can remember once, and it must have been during a summer camp, that they didn't give us weapons or something. I remember standing guard with a big stick once, thinking, what are you? These are your tax dollars at work. What are you training me for? To be a forest ranger? Or what? Yeah. I guess I can ask, were you in the service ever?
No, I grew up with Vietnam on television.
So
So
how did you become kind of interested in veterans then?
I always was interested in military history, and I have no idea why, except maybe it was so foreign to my own
yeah,
experience.
yeah.
So, but then as you start to read it and you learn more about it, then it all just kind of keeps going. So,
No, I've always kind of wondered what kind of man it would take to be a general, to have that many lives and make decisions. I think you gotta have an ego that just won't quit. You gotta
a
So,
lot of
so
them
I
do.
become kind of interested in that. I like Patton. I've been to his museum a few times, and I do wonder what made him tick. What,
Well, I can
yeah.
recommend a very good biography for you,
Yeah.
but that's getting probably a little bit off
Oh,
the course
yeah,
of this
sure,
interview.
right.
Okay. So you get one more. Okay. Now, as you're thinking further, again, are there any other stories that ought to be on record here that we don't?
I don't
have
think
yet?
so. I think
Okay.
I
Well, very good.
think
Well,
I
thank
got
you
it.
very much then.
Well, thanks for your time.